Good afternoon, and it really is a welcome back to our September 12th, 2024 briefing. We had a morning update on 4 topics, one of which will actually carry over to this afternoon. I would like to say in the beginning, this is not our regular formal meeting, and we don't have an invocation, but I would like to ask folks to, Patriot Day was yesterday, and for those of us who were around in 2001, that was a tough time, and it's good to remember that. And I'd like to just ask that we begin this briefing with about a 30-second sort of just moment of silence. Thank you very much. I had a conversation with Katie Hall Nichols, who is here today from the Arts Council, and particularly she thought today was a regular meeting with our regular sort of opportunities for comments from the public. And since she is here, I'm going to ask her just to go ahead and come up and just say a word or two that she was going to say next week if we were all on the right schedule. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman Martin. Hello, commissioners and County Manager Robinson. Great to see you all. I bring greetings on behalf of the Arts Council of Winston-Salem and Forsyth County, and I serve in that role as Chief Marketing Officer and Vice President of Development. I know that there have been a lot of articles lately in the newspaper regarding special appropriations from the county, and I just want to reiterate our support or our gratitude for your support both in the general appropriations as well as with ARPA. I think that your decision to tighten up some of these funding opportunities is a strong one. I think if we've learned anything from ARPA, being able to look at the data and the impact across our county and the citizens of whom live here is a strong one. And so I just want to thank you for all of the support that you all do bring us. Presently, that's $75,000, of which $50,000 goes directly to support your county parks at Tanglewood and Triad Park, and then $25,000 to our general budget. So as you continue to look at how we can best spend the citizens' money, I just want to again express our gratitude. I'm joined by our interim president, Howard Upchurch, and look forward to introducing you very soon to our new president and CEO, Samantha Howard, who will begin and join us on September 23rd. So thank you for all the work you do of the residents and other people working in this industry. So thank you.
Well, thank you very much. And in fact, I will take this opportunity to say that actually I did receive, in the newspaper article in the Journal, they did single out 2 agencies that were mentioned, and the Arts Council was one and Harry's Veterans was the other. And I talked for about 30 minutes with the Harry Veterans folks because they felt like they were sort of singled out when the intention was to give some kind of broad range of agencies that have been supported in the past. But I actually did promise her, Ms. Sabas, that I would actually mention that when we're going to review the agenda. And I was going to mention that very point, and this is a good time because that obviously prompted your visit today, and we do understand that. We appreciate the work that you all have done, and certainly look forward to welcoming our new director. And Howard, I want to thank you very much for your service during this interim period. And as I understand it, I was just talking very briefly, he's going to be the new board chair beginning in January. So thank you for yet another big responsibility and for all your service too. So thanks to both of you.
Thank you, Chairman.
All right. We had one item left over from this morning's session, and actually it was a briefing on our real estate update. And I'm going to ask Kirby Robinson if he would just come forward and give us we'll have an interesting discussion about some of our surplus properties and status of them.
Right. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and Board. I appreciate you having me. And Excited to talk about county real estate matters today and give you kind of an update on that. As the chairman said, excited for some good feedback on these items as well. As an agenda, there are three main properties that I'd like to walk through today, and that's the Hall of Justice, Cyworks, and Sturmer Park Circle. Talk a little bit about the historical approach to selling county surplus properties, which is negotiated offer, advertisement, and upset bid. Discuss a disposition strategy for each property, and that's including the marketing, the offer process. In other words, how do you want to receive offers on these properties? Other terms of sale. As you can imagine, as we sort of advertise these things, I get a lot of questions, and I want to make sure I answer them the way that you want me to, and that's wrapped up kind of in that terms item. And at the end, just kind of summarize what those needs are from the staff perspective. So here is, let me move this little guy right here. Here's a specific look at these properties. The first is the Hall of Justice. It's 163,000 square feet. It's 1.7 acres in size, zone central business, and its tax value is $21 million. In terms of a current status, this facility is obviously vacant. It's maintained at a basic level, and sort of what that means is that the building is assumed to have some value and reusability. So it is being maintained. Those utilities and things like that are obviously being rolled back to save costs, but they're still running. So the monthly operating expenses for the building were budgeted at $11,500 a month. It's a big building. It's got an older HVAC system in it. So even just at a minimal level, that costs some money to run some conditioned air through that facility. I think we're over that right now. Some of that's just the summer. It's been an awfully hot summer. We had some repairs with that HVAC system. I expect to see those costs kind of go back down as it cools off and we go into the winter. In terms of Cyworks, we've talked recently about that facility. There are two buildings there, the total roughly 58,000 square feet. You have the main facility and then the maintenance shop. That property is 28 acres in size. It's a big property, zoned institutional public, roughly $9 million in value. $3.5 to $4 million of that, of course, is wrapped up in the land. At the board's direction, that facility has really been closed down and maintained at a very minimal level. Monthly operating expenses were budgeted around $2,000 a month. And then you have Sturmer Park Circle, really talking about kind of the green space there on the corner of University and Chatelain. That's an institutional public property as well. Value range, between $5.3 and $6.3 million is probably about right. And that's currently maintained by General Services. It's basically mowed. It costs about $3,000 a year to maintain. It's a very minimal holding cost there. Looking something. There we go. All right, so an overview of each property, just and a little bit of commentary there. This, of course, the Hall of Justice. It's roughly almost a block in size. And this property, and this is a little, I guess, free advertisement, but it's got a lot going for it. I mean, it is obviously got a great location. The target market for me, from what I've heard from potentially interested buyers, has really been housing. That's what I've heard the most from. I've heard from three firms that have reached out, and they don't disclose their buyers. It's always sort of a mystery while they're talking to you, but they've been looking at that facility. Can they redevelop it as housing? Doesn't mean it couldn't be other things, mixed use retail or whatever it may be, but that's been sort of where the questions have come from. Excuse me. Again, it's got a lot going for it. It is eligible for historic tax credits. The surrounding development, I think, really benefits the facility. You'll have to excuse me, I'm getting over the crud, so I'm going to have a couple water breaks. Surrounding development really benefits the facility. You have the museum there, the plaza, Marshall Park. What was the Piedmont Federal Building, I think, is being redeveloped as a restaurant. 8 West 3rd with the mixed-use retail and apartments there. I mean, I think it's just going to be a really neat area. There are some challenges, obviously. It had some functional obsolescence there. That sort of brutalist edifice doesn't necessarily jump off the page at people sometimes. But, it's got its own personality. The windows are a little bit of an issue, getting natural light in. The ceiling heights are a little uneven because it was developed as a courthouse. So you have the front side of the building with high ceilings for the courtrooms, and they sort of drop off in the back. I think one of the challenges that folks run into as they look at this facility is they assume there's parking under it, and there's not. So one of the things we have to do is be careful to point out, but there's parking right next door. So again, there's got a lot going for it, but there are some challenges as well. Here's Cyworks. Again, it's a big piece of property. It's 28 acres. They're off of 52. The highest and best use, as we've said, we assume to be industrial, but I have had several serious inquiries from institutional public users, which was sort of unexpected. Now, of course, none of those have materialized, but I've had some calls that sort of seem to have some meat and potatoes behind them from folks that may have been interested in using it for that type of use. So who knows? I think we really yet to see whether the building helps or doesn't the marketability of that property. Because again, we really haven't started pushing it out there as for sale yet and started marketing that to the community. Obviously, the LWCF restrictions there are a challenge at your direction, and we have started that conversion process to identify replacement property and obtain a Yellow Book appraisal for the SciWorks property. And again, that's really geared at saying what is the current fair market value of the land. We assume that to be around $3.5 to $4 million, and that's what we'll need to move elsewhere in the community to be able to sell that property. And then last is but not least, Sturmer Park Circle. And this is really, again, talking about sort of this undeveloped area bounded by Chatelain University and Sturmer Park Circle. And I'll point out that Sturmer Park Circle is a state road. That's, I think, important as folks sort of look at that. It's zoned institutional public. And if the board wants to sell this property, you've had a lot of interest along the way in retail. You have some of the highest traffic counts in the city that come down University right there. And so you've had interest from fueling stations, from restaurants, from sort of, boutique mini shopping centers. You might be able to fit an anchor store in there if you got creative. I mean, there's a lot of just developable retail property there if the board was interested in selling that. Again, high traffic counts. The DOT does have some plans to improve the roadway there and a turn-in lane into Sturmer Park Circle, which helps. That's something that a developer would have to look at, though, is how you'd get in and out of that piece of property. Any sale there would be below 10 acres, so it's going to fall into that subdivision process, and so there's going to be some governmental approvals there that's going to, just make that a little more complex along the way. I will say there is a small park here. I use that term park loosely, but it's got some picnic tables here, kind of on this, I guess, southwest end. In the past, the board has leased that area to ARCA. And it wasn't really for them to use as a park. They sort of still allowed it to be as a park, but it was more so they could control sort of what was happening there since they are an addiction recovery facility. All right, so sort of the meat and potatoes of the presentation here is really around, how the board would want to go about selling these properties, assuming that you do. For past sales, you've of course directed us to use the negotiated offer, advertisement, and upset bid process. That's of course not the only way the local government can sell property, but it's certainly the most widely used among local government. To start the process, the board may designate a property as surplus and direct the manager to solicit fair market value offers for that property. As the attorney has told me before, you don't have to do that. You don't have to declare it as surplus to be able to sell it. Sometimes that's helpful to have that board resolution that I can send folks to say, here's what the board said they wanted in this property. I think that clarity can be really helpful in that process. The fair market part of that is also important sometimes for folks to see. Again, the advertisement and upset bid process is widely used among local governments. There's some variations, though, obviously, in how those properties are advertised and sold. And again, the board probably knows this, but some local governments may use an RFP process. For instance, the city of Greensboro is trying to develop, some housing. So they have a piece of property, and they said, well, here's our RFP process. And potential developers and buyers have to meet these requirements. So they're really restricting the use and the development of that property through that process. Whereas the state says, I've got an office building in downtown Raleigh, here's what I want for it, make me an offer, right? It sort of runs the gamut. I think in the past, we've used kind of that traditional listing process of what the commercial real estate community sort of expects to see. But again, that's at your discretion of how you would want to advertise those type of properties. In marketing, our traditional efforts have included putting a physical sign on the property, sort of what you expect to see with a commercial real estate sale. We have a great communications department, so we'll make brochures. We'll have an online listing that you would see like on LoopNet or something like that. although, we have some real estate agents here, we wouldn't be doing this under my license, for instance. So it would not be on MLS. So we're representing you as your agents, but it's not going to be on that traditional listing service. But we do have ways to push that out into the commercial real estate community. So that's a big part of the advertisement. And then, I think an important part, especially when we're dealing with these type of properties, is outreach to the local real estate community. I mean, there's a lot of legwork that those folks will do to bring a buyer if they see an opportunity. In terms of an offer process, and again, this is where a lot of the questions come in for me. In past transactions, the board has required a bidder to tell you three things. One, who they are. What's your name as registered with the Secretary of State? I'll get lots of things that say buyer one or something like that. No, tell us what your name is. Tell us what you're offering for the property and what you want to do with it. And so what you want to do with it requires a rezoning or some governmental approval, we want to know that. And so we try to bring that back to the board. I've seen the board do that two different ways. One is really kind of with what I would call a rolling process, just sort of saying this property is available for sale and open for fair market value offers, and it's open. I've seen the board also do a defined offer period where you set a start and an end date from when you are soliciting offers, and then you review them at the end and pick one to advertise. And again, all that's at the board discretion, and the board can reject offers at any time. Other terms to consider as you look at the process is price. In the past, we've not set an asking price for property. If you pull up some listings that other local governments have, they may have an asking price on that. Traditionally, what we've said is, take a look at the tax value, potential bidder. That's a little bit of a challenge because the tax department doesn't spend a ton of time valuing non-taxable property. But we do work with them, to understand what they see as the fair market value for those properties. The other is development. We'll get asked sometimes, well, what is is the board going to require a certain type of thing to be here? Or are you going to condition the upset bid process? And we say, well, it's up to the board's discretion. So if you did have a potential use in mind, we would certainly want to tell folks that. Pardon me. The other is brokerage fees. I'll get, of course, asked a lot, are you going to pay me if I bring you a buyer? And we say no. It's not, generally local governments that I've seen do not pay brokerage fees. If a firm wants to bring a buyer, we ask them to negotiate directly with that buyer. And that's kind of how the board has handled that in the past, that we just say that we don't pay brokerage fees. You handle that with the buyer, which is a little bit different because, again, we're the seller, and traditionally the seller would pay that 6% or whatever it may be. For me. And then again is the contract. So by the time you're advertising an offer, we are going to be negotiating that contract in conjunction with the attorney's office. And but we do want folks to tell you how much time they're requesting for due diligence and governmental approvals. And the reason I think that's important is because most folks want to be able to cancel a contract with you during that time, which to some extent that makes sense. If they're not able to rezone a property for a specific use, you sort of understand that. But what we don't want them to do is to continue that process into perpetuity. So we want them to move expeditiously through that process. And so what the board may consider doing is requiring a bidder to submit non-refundable earnest money should they need an extension of that period. So we can work through some interesting things there to make sure folks move as quickly as they can through that process. And then at one quick, Sturmer Park specific slide. So this has got a little bit of a history behind what a previous board considered to be surplus there. So in August of 2015, the board directed the manager to issue an RFP for purchase or lease of 6.07 acres with a minimum bid of $5.1 million. No offers were received from that, but that's what a board said they considered surplus in the past. And I think it was because this area is where sort of that Sturmer Park is, and we had seen some conceptual drawings, and maybe there could be more development there or whatever it may be. So that's sort of the question for this board, is what you would consider surplus, if anything. But you have gotten offers on that property since that time. None have risen to the level that we felt like it met your metric for consideration. It is, again, a developable portion of the property is roughly 9 acres. What you're looking at in this whole thing is 9 acres. This was a survey of the 6 acres here. And again, this corner is obviously the most valuable piece of that property. If you wanted to sell the whole thing, it would be tough to sell it in parts. Because if you sell the corner, you have to find the matching use and that buyer that's going to be able to come in next to it. And so sort of what we've told folks in the past is, if the board wants the whole thing to be surplus, we'll probably want you to make an offer on the whole thing and then show us what that development would look like so you sort of you can understand what you'd be approving. Value range, again, $13.50 a square foot, kind of away from the intersection, $16 a square foot, closer to the intersection. And then DOT, again, we need to study, if another driveway permit, needed to go there. So in other words, if somebody needed to turn in here to come into let's say a gas station, DOT would have to do their study on that, and they may not allow that. And buyer would need to complete a subdivision process there, again, because it's less than 10 acres. All right, so that was a lot of information. So I tried to put a summary slide together to bring some of those thoughts into one place. So at your direction, we're ready. We're ready to get out and start marketing some property and selling it if that's what you want us to do. I just want to make sure that we, as your agents, do it the way you want us to and bring you back offers that you would find advantageous for the hall, for SciWorks, and for Sturmer Park. So the requested direction that I listed here, you have the sale process, which we assume is negotiated offer, advertisement, and upset bid. In terms of marketing, did you want to follow sort of our traditional process where we put kind of a listing together, which is really a 1 or 2 pager, specifics on the property to advertise it and say, make us an offer based on this information? Did you want an RFP process, which is really requiring a lot more information from a developer? That may be if you desire to control the development of a property a little bit more, an RFP may be more the way to go with that. Did you want use restrictions on the property? Do you want to see a certain thing there, or do you want to allow development within certain zoning classifications? We're going to assume you don't want to pay brokerage fees unless you tell us differently. And then, the desired timeline, we'll assume that you want us to recommend a reasonable timeline that a buyer would need to move through for due diligence and governmental approvals. And then, of course, the Sturmer Park question of what portion of that do you consider to be surplus, if any? And there's a bonus slide after this that I can get to next on future properties. Mr. Chairman, if you'd like me to pause here, I'm happy to do that.
Why don't you just go ahead and mention the other two?
Okay. So future properties. So you have the Family Services Skyland Elementary School property, and this is at 2050 Big House Gaines Boulevard. Again, the status there is a legal process going on where the Winston-Salem Foundation is examining a reversionary clause in the deed to see if Forsyth County, and the attorney's going to correct me if I say this stuff wrong, that the property may be coming back to the county. Family Services has left that property. It's vacant. When they did, they told the city, which was close, but they probably should have told the Wells Fargo as trustee for the foundation in the county because it's been vacant. And so we do not know the condition of that, and we're sort of waiting to hear back from Wells Fargo as trustee there of what questions they would have around that reversionary interest. So we've asked to get into the property just to see it, just in case, and we've heard that they have finally gotten keys. So certainly a step in the right direction. And then you have Amos Cottage, which the board will recall you executed a lease with Wake about a year ago, and that's a revenue lease. It's $8 a square foot from what I recall. It's leased to them for about another year. I did reach out to Amos Cottage because I know they were, Wake was constructing space elsewhere in the county, and it seemed a little wishy-washy at the time that the board did the lease of whether they would get out on time. And they said, yes, we are on track right now to be out by next September. So again, you got almost a 37,000 square foot facility there. It is a big facility, medical office space on 3 acres next to Novant. Excuse me. So there's a lot going on in the real estate world, and I'm certainly happy to answer any questions that you have or facilitate any discussion that I can.
Questions for Kirby? Probably, I kind of think that they could be done a little, in terms of your methods, I think they could be done differently. I think the courthouse is the big one, with $21 million in our guesstimate and tax value. And I'm not so sure that we should not, I would toss out the idea of a more professional appraisal of that building to get another kind of handle on that. And I'm sort of thinking a little more conventional with a kind of like a realtor, kind of handle it. And we set a price. We set a price for it, what we expect to get out of it. I remember Commissioner Linville talking about this back during the courthouse debate, that he didn't want to see this board give away a building, that was, to whole lots of other things in that process. And I think we even checked at that time that the building construction cost was in the 50 million kind of range. I may not be correct. My memory may be wrong on that, but I think I would like to think I realize there's a lot of upfit for any use, which would be a big part of it, but it is one heck of a location, I think, for the future. And I think there are some possibilities that folks, and in fact, the retired county manager owes me some money that we bet on whether it would sell by a certain date, which it did not, by the way. He thought it would be gone pretty quickly. And I said, well, I don't think it's going to be going that quickly. So I think we need something a little more, perhaps aggressive on that. That gives us that and sets a price and try to get that one moved. That's a big property, and it may not be $11,500 a month during the winter or during the fall here. That's an expensive piece of property to keep to keep going, to keep it sort of mothballed without it deteriorating. Because once buildings are abandoned, it's just amazing how they just begin to, without anything, everything starts looking awful inside and smells awful. I mean, you got to do a lot of HVAC, circulation to do that. So I think the sooner we could get on that, and particularly with interest rates going down, got housing kind of, demands, downtown housing is now established. I mean, I'm just thinking out loud. It just seems like that's one we could approach totally different. It's sort of the big star in this thing. And part of the second priority is, in fact, is colliding, because we have that lease attached to it, that forever, issue for, public recreational purposes. And it's a piece of property that is in a prime location for development, and whatever we need to do kind of to get that moving, I think those are two. We've already got the appraisal in the works for that one, which is really a necessary one with the feds on the parks, the state parks, I guess national parks or whatever the name of it is, cultural resources, whatever the name of it is.
But everybody's involved on that one, yes, sir.
There's a lot of people in that one. And the other three, I could easily see being, just sort of our own sort of advertising, looking for, the Sturmer Park thing is probably clearly the most valuable, and we really thought somebody was seriously interested in that. Turned out to be not so serious. And I guess for me, it could be the two parcels or not. It'd be one of those things you offer for sale. They're both available. You can make an offer on both, or you can make an offer on one parcel and just kind of see where that goes. I could see that becoming, that's certainly some value. It's a pretty corner, and people talking about we had looking at our comprehensive plan 2045 today, and talking about green spaces and so forth. It is a pretty area in the fall, particularly those trees are very pretty typically, and kind of in the middle of a busy area, but it's also valuable. And we are trying to be, there may be a blend of that. I don't know how people look at it. Parcel that we'll keep for a little park, and we make it a little park or something, something like that. The other two, a little ways out, but we can get to, a lot of you may remember the old Head Start building, the Skyland School, and it's had various renovations. I've been in it probably in the last 2 years. It has some potential. Now, it has potential. It may have some more potential with part of it torn down and the newer part put in use, but it has a housing potential area. Good location also, very good location. there for that.
And I would say I did run that one, just put some feelers out kind of with folks that specialize in turning old institutional properties like schools into housing. And there's some interest, I think, out there of what that could look
Yeah, I
like.
would think so. I mean, obviously, it just seems that one could be more negotiated upset bid kind of deal. I'm sort of thinking, that's just off the top of my head, and I'm sure others of you have opinions.
Couple of the properties that I've got a reaction to, the courthouse first, that seems like, if a developer could overcome the structural design challenges, would be a prime location for downtown housing, or combination housing and retail restaurant mixed use. That we could both get a good price for and switch that from being public institutional property to tax base. The other one that I had an immediate reaction to is the Family Services Skyline Elementary School property. I think whatever we do there, we ought to keep in mind that it's immediately adjacent to an existing park and part of the core greenway system. And we ought to keep whatever we sell our interest in that for compatible with those uses.
Sure.
Other comments?
I got some comments. As far as the Hall of Justice, why couldn't you use the same method as you were talking about the Strum Park Circle, and I'll get to that last, but I believe you mentioned about not paying broker's fee. Why wouldn't that work with the Hall of Justice?
It could. I think the difference in using the staff method versus a traditional listing agent is a listing agent's going to come in and they're going to spend their own money to do a feasibility study and to understand the target market that could really get you the most value for that facility, I think. And then they're going to go nationally to that market and make sure they see this property. Whereas I'm going to do my best. And we're going to do our approach and I'm really going to push the local commercial real estate community to go find us folks. But it's going to be a little different than a lot of those buyers are used to. And so, I mean, it's not saying it wouldn't work. It's just a little different. And so it certainly could. Again, I think it's the type of exposure you might want to get to it. That, from a staff perspective, there are some limitations.
Well, I'll give that thought. And tax office, they might be right on the value, but that don't mean that I'd want to sell it for that. Right. So, in the SciWorks, you're going to have to go through, have some time to think about that. You're going to have some more hoops to go through.
Yes, sir.
On that. And Strum Park Circle, I don't have any interest in selling. I know there's plenty of people that's got enough money to buy it, but I don't think they'd want to spend that enough money to pay to buy that.
Chair Martin, I do have a point about the Hall of Justice. I would just remind us, based on NACO and then NCACC appeal to counties for affordable housing, that this may present us an opportunity to partner strategically with the developer to add value locally to affordable housing. I would hope that since the taxpayers have obviously allowed us the ability to own the Hall of Justice, and there is a grave need in this county for affordable housing, that we look at this opportunity through the lens of what's needed in this county and not just trying to get the most dollar to come back into the county without any consideration of the need of most of our citizens here.
And I appreciate that. And certainly the point of the discussion to make sure that I tell folks what the board wants me to tell them when we advertise what you'd want to see there.
For me, I am ready now to place all three of them on the market. In fact, I'm sorry the Hall of Justice has not been put on the market earlier. I think it should have been put on the market the day the folks moved out, but that's just me. But all three of these, I think, should be put on the market by a realtor as soon as possible.
Other comments?
Well, having worked in the Hall of Justice on all 7 floors for 45 years, of course, with the lawyer group that advocated for our wonderful new facility, we regarded it as unfixable. We were taking potential investors through the courthouse 5 years ago to see if anyone would have an interest in it. Its infrastructure is essentially wrecked. The brutalism design is revolting, and I do think that demolition would make it a much more attractive site and perhaps provide the opportunity for affordable housing that was indicated earlier.
I don't know if you can convert an old industrial power plant to upscale retail restaurant use, and a tobacco warehouse to pretty pricey residential. There are a lot of people with more money than me that are going for these old historic character-filled properties that they're willing to pay enormous amounts for. So I'd give it a shot.
We did cross that line into 50 years old this year, so it's very exciting. And so perhaps that credit helps. I'm not sure.
Because it does qualify for lots of credits, does it not?
My understanding is it would qualify for historic tax credits at this point, yes, sir.
As well as, is it not in an empowerment zone too?
An opportunity zone?
Opportunity zone.
Yes,
excuse
sir, I
me.
believe it is.
There's some opportunities there, I think.
So just clarity for staff. I believe we heard the majority want us to put the properties up for sale for fair market value to see what we get. And then it sounds like it's debatable on the courthouse on whether we utilize a professional firm or not. I will say our staff recommendation is that for the courthouse, we really do feel like we need a professional firm to help us with that. And if the board is okay with that approach, that would be our staff recommendation. And then we can just bring back and see with you all what we get from that.
So just to be clear, in my mind, when you say a professional staff, you mean you need outside broker, real estate agent?
We're going to get you a listing agent, yes, ma'am, like a local firm that's going to market it just like they would the Wells Fargo building or something like that.
And we'll have to ensure it's a competitive process because obviously there will be a lot of firms who will want this business. And so we'll go down the competitive path to make sure that we're okay in that regard.
Is the old BB&T building, is it out? I heard it was just about resolved. There were not a lot of issues, but is it close to going on the market? Do you know, Kirby?
My understanding is the exact same as yours, that it's close, but there's nothing happening right now. But again, I don't know. This is sort of what I've heard. I know there are some other concerns sort of in that office type of community that, lends itself to our building being looked at for a non-office type of use. So that, maybe help.
Well, there may be some synergy, quite frankly, in two places like that. And there's parking under the old BB&T building. And, I understood the best use was going to be residential there, I thought. But that was kind of that each floor plate kind of lent itself to
Those are the folks that we certainly heard from. Yes, sir. It's from residential, maybe with some business on the lower levels type of thing.
Because you could do a lot, man. In the old courthouse, you could, speaking to Commissioner Wilson, you could, in some of those courtrooms, you could have what a great workout center you could have like a little mini gym, and some of the big ones, high ceilings, you got that kind of stuff handled, and it's got It has interesting character.
I just have one follow-up question, just so that it's clear in my mind, because I don't definitely understand the rationale around bringing in outside support, although I do respect that staff is saying that ideally we could bring in outside. So what would be the main reason why we need outside support?
So it goes a little bit to Commissioner Linville's question about sort of the difference. And again, I think that, a commercial real estate firm is going to be geared to getting you the highest price. Not that I wouldn't be, because that's how they're going to make their money. And they're going to invest in that process to identify what that market is going to be. They're going to do a feasibility study on the building. So they're going to know this question around housing or retail. And then they're going to know where to market that. They're going to produce your marketing material. They're going to be able to use the relevant websites that investors watch. And they're going to have the connections to really publicize this property as for sale. That as wonderful as our real estate mechanisms may be, we certainly, that's not our main business. So we can replicate some of that, but we certainly can't rise to that level. And so I think that you would expect a higher offer if you use a professional. It's sort of our thought, if that's fair.
So do you think that would be offset by, of course, if they're putting in the work, they're going to want to get paid, proportionately. So are we really going to be able to, I guess, offset what they're going to charge us by way of what they're going to bring in for an offer, you think?
Well, there's two things I would say to that. One is, the first part is, I'm not sure. I would think so, but I'm not sure. I mean, there's not a great way for me to compare that to when we've sold a court. We have sold a courthouse in the past, but it wasn't like this one, right? The other is timing. I think a professional is going to be able to get you an offer potentially quicker, and it may be higher. And so again, you have holding costs right now that have hit $20,000 a month. And so you are spending money right now to own the building and to hold it. So if you can move it quicker, that also plays into the financial consideration.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Well, do we have a consensus on that, or do we need to come back as an official agenda item on this? I mean, we just kind of batted around a bunch of ideas today.
Well, what's generally the percentage cost of broker?
It's a little more negotiable and commercial, but I mean, a listing agent, 5-6%, something like that. I mean, I think with a competitive process, I've never bid something like this before, but we could certainly put out an RFP for, a listing firm and ask them to respond with their brokerage percentage. And that contract then would come back to the board to approve. So
And what they would do to market it, and what are you going to get for their fee?
That's right.
And what is their network, and what is their
That's right.
so forth?
Yes, sir.
So then that would be an opportunity for the board, if you decide you do not want us to go down that path, we could do the other option.
So
That was
back
your
to my question, do we need to have this an agenda item, or is this sufficient to say, go forth and get on it? And do we?
So I think what we're saying is, if we go ahead and do an RFP to find a firm to do it, it's going to have to come back to you
All right,
anyways.
that'd be good. That's good. Do that. Great. We didn't quite, so still, the water got stirred, but we got a little direction
moving.
on that one. Yeah,
Yes, sir.
moving. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Kirby. All right. And we have one other discussion item on, Kyle Haney is going to talk some about some changes in our fire contracts.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. So you may recall back in June, the board passed a resolution adopting some contracts for 12 of our volunteer fire departments. They had previously had a 5-year contract that began in 2019, and so that contract ended June 30th. The board passed a resolution adopting those contracts. Since that adoption, there's been some discussion amongst the fire departments on the terms of those contracts. Specifically, the contract added a new provision that mentioned the possibility of the county being able to change the funding system for which we fund fire departments. Not saying that the county was going to do that, but saying that that was an option. The fire departments, going to them and talking to them, have expressed some concern about that. Meanwhile, we are, at the board's instruction, beginning a work group to study the entire fire system to understand how we make it the most efficient and effective possible. So in hearing the feedback from the fire departments, they requested that the board extend their previous contract that was adopted in 2019 into June 30th for one more year while that discussion is ongoing to see how that may affect a future contract. Really the request for the board is to adopt a resolution that would supersede the contracts that were approved in June, but extend the previous 2019 contract for 1 year to June 30th, 2025, while we engage in that fire study group conversation.
Any questions for Kyle? All right, thank you. Okay, I think we're ready to turn the meeting over to our county manager.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good afternoon, Commissioner, staff, and guests. We will have our items for consideration for the September 19th meeting. Our agenda item number 1 is a special resolution. It's a proclamation recognizing September 20th as Smart Start of Forsyth County Day in Forsyth County. We will have Smart Start staff here next week to accept this proclamation. Agenda item number 2 is a resolution delegating approval authority of volunteer fire department requests to purchase, lease, construct, design, finance, mortgage, or enter into any contract for the acquisition or disposition of capital property under $50,000 to the county manager. Our deputy manager, Kyle Haney, will brief this item.
Good afternoon, Commissioners, again. As part of those contracts we just discussed in 2019, there was a provision, and additional ones that were, we had 4 that started in 2020. There's a provision that really centered around the acquisition or disposal of capital property. Essentially, the requirement from the contract was that any fire department who was going to sell or dispose of or purchase item of capital properties as defined over $10,000 in value would need to notify the county, and the county commissioners would have to approve that disposition or acquisition. The goal of that really was around making sure we understand possible tax rate implications in the future. If a department were to buy a fire truck, would that put pressure on the board to have to raise the fire tax district rate in the future? That was done in 2019, and like we said, the bar for it having come to the board was set at $10,000. What we've seen is that there are some items that are over $10,000 that really would not have an impact on the future tax rate. Some sale of property that's over $10,000, but really is not going to cause future issues with the tax rate. So what this item does is the fire departments would still have to provide that notification, but it would delegate the board's authority to the county manager to approve those requests that as long as they were under $50,000. Happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Kyle? Thank you.
Agenda item number 3, or approval of minutes for the meeting of September 5th. Madam Clerk, have those gone out yet?
They will go out tomorrow.
Great, thank you. Agenda item number 4 is a resolution authorizing the appropriation of interest earnings in the Pandemic Response Special Revenue Fund and transfer to the general fund to aid in the development of the Community Grants Program. B is an amendment to the Pandemic Response Special Revenue Fund to appropriate interest earnings and transfers to the general fund. And C is an amendment to the fiscal year 25 budget ordinance to appropriate $78,000 from the Pandemic Response Special Revenue Fund to aid in the development of the Community Grants Program. Our Deputy CFO, Lee Plunkett, will brief this item.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. This item before you is similar to one that was adopted back in February for our Grants Compliance Program Manager, where we utilize interest earnings from ARPA, from unspent funds, which you're allowed to use on any governmental service. And we transferred those funds to the general fund to offset costs for her work on our new centralized compliance program for all of our grants countywide. And so this is a similar process where we are asking to appropriate $78,000 of interest earnings to fund the ARPA administrator, which is Bailey Arnold, to help aid in the startup of the community grants structure and program. Bailey and Kim are very versed in the compliance part of the ARPA program and the way that the policy is being proposed to be set up. And so they would be very good to get this off the ground and running. And this will allow a minimal impact on the general fund in the current fiscal year, so there wouldn't be any issue from that perspective. It also keeps us in compliance. So right now, Bailey cannot work on that at all, given that they are the ARPA administrator and funded completely with ARPA dollars. And so this would allow him to begin to work on it. And then the final thing that will help us tremendously is the administrative budget of ARPA is running out. And so this will be the perfect time to transition Bailey into this new piece of their duties.
Any questions
Happy to
for
answer
Lee?
any questions.
Good.
Thank you.
Thank you. Agenda item number 5 is an adoption of the 2025 Housing Grants Projects Ordinance. Ashley Penley from the Community Economic Development Department will brief this item.
Good afternoon, Commissioners and Manager. This item would establish the Community and Economic Development Department's 2025 Grant Project Ordinance. This ordinance will allow for the continuation of a couple of our programs, including the Housing Rehabilitation Program and the Down Payment Assistance Program. The total of this ordinance is $397,000. $397,825. Just to give you a little bit of a breakdown of the revenue streams that make up that total, we have an annual allocation from the Winston-Salem Forsyth County Home Consortium of $217,000. We also receive local match from the participating municipalities in that consortium of a total of $10,000. So that includes Clemens, Louisville, Kernersville, Rural Hall, and Tobaccoville. And then we also have $38,825 that is being transferred from the general fund to meet the county's local match requirements. Those are set by HUD. There's a whole formula behind it if you'd like to do some math on the side. It's real fun. Also, the final funding source within that GPO is $132,000 that we were awarded through North Carolina Housing Finance Agency for the Urgent Repair 24 grant. You guys approved that application back in December, so we were awarded that, and we appreciate that. So that is a little of the background and context with those funding streams. Happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Ashley? Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Agenda item number 6 is an amendment to the 2020 Radio System Upgrade Capital Projects Ordinance to accept a transfer from the general fund for radios for the Winston-Salem Forsyth County Schools. Our Budget Director, Kyle Wolf, will brief this item.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. As you'll recall, back in the budget process for FY25, the Board of Commissioners included $1,706,805 in the adopted budget as part of the school's adopted budget for the school system, and that was for radio replacements for buses and buildings. It's part of an overall radio system upgrade that the county is managing. And so this item actually will just transfer those funds into our radio system upgrade CPO to allow the radios to be purchased.
Questions for Kyle? Good, thank you.
Agenda item number 7 is an amendment to the fiscal year 25 budget ordinance to appropriate $1,112,080 from North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services for Agreement Addendum 716, which is the COVID-19 vaccine program. Our Health Director, Joshua Swift, will brief this item.
Yes, good afternoon, Commissioners. This funding is to be used for efforts or items to deliver COVID-19 vaccines to the community, including equipment, personnel, supplies, minor construction, renovations, and outreach, but may not be used for vaccine purchase. I think in summary, this is the last of those COVID funds that we've had over the years. And I know we've heard your direction about how to use this. We have a team put together and we're working, you can see, they're working on a plan with lots of different avenues for ways we can use these funds. So I'd be happy to answer any questions. And I would say too, we've also asked that they put an eye towards obviously how we could use them now for COVID, but really how it could be used for things beyond COVID, for other vaccine efforts, for other outreach and things like that. Any questions?
Questions for our Health Director? No, it's just, any questions?
Oh,
We're good.
Okay, agenda item number 8 is also Mr. Swift's. It's an amendment to the fiscal year 25 budget ordinance to appropriate $1,008,877 from DHHS for agreement addendum 117.
Yes, this is public health and infrastructure funds for local workforce development. And what we're trying to do is, like I said, look towards the future. We have until November of 2027 to use these funds. We've had them for a few years. They've been carried over, if you remember, but we've been working on the direction from the state was to spend our COVID funds as much as possible because of the long runway for this. Really focused on leadership development, training that's available that we could use to even possibly bring in-house training in instead of sending staff out. We could bring the training in and be more efficient. And then also a focus on our emerging leaders, like our young individuals that are maybe in leadership positions, but on the front line leaders or hope to be in leadership positions, how we can train and give them the capacity.
Can you use any of that money for recruitment,
Yes,
to recruit talent, et cetera,
yes.
in the workforce? I think that'd be a great opportunity too. Any questions for Joshua?
More comment. I think this is certainly the time to be looking at how we can use resources for the long term in supporting vaccinations in the community. Mecklenburg just announced their first measles case in years and years.
Yeah.
And it's more critically important than ever that people understand the need and value to have their families participate in these vaccination programs.
Yeah, thank you for that. And the team works very hard. We'll be rolling out COVID and flu vaccine in October for the public. I appreciate the commissioner's support that we're able to provide flu vaccine at no charge to the community. We are taking some of those other leftover COVID funds to buy the COVID vaccine, which is over $100 a dose. Not any county funds for that, but for the COVID vaccine, but using those state funds that we've received. And then a school team, you'll hear from one of the assistant health directors in a minute about another matter, but her team in school health has given individuals, probably a few thousand individuals have gotten vaccine at the health department this fall, and just this early part of the fall, so they can stay in school. Thank you.
Thank you, Joshua.
Agenda item number 9 is an amendment to the fiscal year 25 budget ordinance to reconcile the medication-assisted treatment grant and the sheriff's office budget. Kim Bussey, our deputy budget director, will brief this item.
Good afternoon, commissioners. So this item is necessary to appropriate unspent and remaining medication-assisted treatment grant, or the MAT funds, back into the sheriff's office fiscal year 25 budget. There's a little context here. On September the 21st, 2023, the Forsyth County Board of Commissioners appropriated $388,884 for this 3-year DPS grant to support this medication-assisted treatment grant in the jail. In fiscal year 24, the Sheriff's Office partnered with a few organizations to help this mission. NAFCare, our jail medical provider, ARCA, and Insight Human Services, and their role was to identify individuals and provide treatment with Vivitrol injections. During budget development this year, we did include we had a planned reconciliation for this grant, but we did include what we thought actual expenditures were going to be, with plans to look at where we actually ended up near the end of the fiscal year. We now know the amount spent, a little over $9,900. We know what we included in the budget, and so this item is necessary to take that balance, that budget, and include it back into the fiscal year 25 budget for the Sheriff's Office to continue working towards this grant. I will say that the grant term does end on December 25th, 2025, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have about this item.
I have just one. I just, as I read that and looked at under $10,000 spent, just struck me as a really low amount. Does that mean that, what does that mean?
So I asked the same question to the sheriff's office. It was a little surprising figure that not much was spent. Two things: they got started a little late. They did put in place again the 3 contracts, annual contracts in fiscal year 24, but really to get things going was a little bit later than they anticipated. And then the other thing is they were having a little trouble making sure things were covered under the scope of the grant. So I think there are conversations now with DPS to make sure that they're doing all they can do to expend these funds and maybe to change some of the particular expenditures to be covered that are not currently. So there are conversations being had, and I don't know much more of the specifics from there, but if you'd like, I can get some information from the sheriff's office and bring it to you before next week.
No, well, I just hope that we can, I mean, this is an opportunity.
I agree.
We need to spend it. I know there's got to be a demand. There's got to be folks that need it. So I'm hoping we can step that up.
Agreed. I did.
Any other questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Agenda item number 10 is a resolution ratifying a contract between Forsyth County and the North Carolina Department of Public Safety and Youth Collaborative, Inc. for youth intensive intervention services from Project X and an amendment to the fiscal year budget ordinance to appropriate funding from DPS. And Aisha Carter from our Budget and Management Department will brief this item.
Good afternoon, County Commissioners. The agreement between Youth Collaborative, Inc. and North Carolina Department of Public Safety in Forsyth County awards $128,296. These funds do not require a local match and are 100% pass-through funds funded by North Carolina Department of Public Safety for monthly disbursement by Forsyth County. And the Juvenile Crime Prevention Council does support this funding. Any questions?
Does the Juvenile Crime Prevention Council also support this Project X? Are they a part of the Project X funding? I saw,
Youth Collaborative is Project X.
sorry, say it one more time. Sorry.
Youth Collaborative is Project X. The nonprofit name is Youth Collaborative. The program is Project X, and the Juvenile Crime Prevention Council does support Project X.
And this grant is different from what they do, how so?
It's not different, but it's in addition to. So they also receive funding from the North Carolina Department of Public Safety, aside from the funding that they get from the JCPC Council.
Okay, all right, I got it. It's just a grant piece. Any other questions for Aisha? Thank you.
Agenda item number 11 is a resolution authorizing execution of a service subscription agreement with True IP Solutions LLC to provide hosted voice services for our MIS department. Gary Kuntz, our Chief Information Officer, will brief this item.
Good afternoon, Commissioners and Manager and staff. What this item brings to you today is it continues a contract with True IP Solutions to provide cloud-hosted desk telephone services. We made this transition back in 2020. That transition replaced the traditional copper lines coming into the building that was put in place in 2002. We did go back out to the market to make sure that what we're doing is still appropriate, and on the resolution you have the numbers that comes back from that. So what we are doing is still the right path for the county. This is a rate-based contract, which fixes the prices for us for the next 5 years. There is no inclination. They can't raise their prices on us for the next 5 years for us. So it's a really good deal for the county. It does not obligate us to stay with them necessarily. It does just, like I said, it's a rate-based contract, so it does fix the price. If we find something better mousetrap in the future, we can pursue that. But it's for telephone services.
Yeah, the only question I had, I was shocked at how much higher the other proposals that you received were. I mean, they're not twice, but one of them was over twice. And I figured that'd just be a super competitive. I mean, I just figured
you would think it would be.
I would think that'd be just like nickels difference in the monthly, kind of rates per unit. But,
this is a go-to-market strategy. I mean, telephone services are something that's been around for a long time. AT&T and Bell South has owned those for a very long time. And there's a lot of companies that are still taking advantage of companies that are used to paying high prices for that. So we are glad to do business with True IP Solutions. They have been a good partner with us. They are a North Carolina company. They're a small company, but they've done well by us.
I really appreciate the bidding activity, and we're into that. And we got another good deal for 5 years, so thank you for that. Any other questions for Gary?
Thank you.
Agenda item number 12 is a resolution ratifying and authorizing execution of an interlocal agreement between Forsyth County, the City of Winston-Salem, and the Town of Kernersville regarding the shared use of the North Carolina Governor's Highway Safety Program Traffic Safety Project Grant Award for the continuation of the Forsyth County DWI Joint Task Force. Randy Hunzucker from the Sheriff's Office will brief this item.
Thanks, Chantel, and good afternoon, Commissioners. The City of Winston-Salem received notification of award from the NCDOT for a 15th year for the DWI Task Force. The grant covers 25% of eligible expenses. Task Force is staffed by 1 officer and 1 sergeant from the Winston-Salem PD, 1 deputy in the Sheriff's Office, and 2 officers from the Kernersville PD, and they operate throughout Forsyth County. For your consideration is approval of an interlocal and a mutual assistance agreement. The interlocal outlines the staff responsibilities regarding the grant funds, which are managed by the city, and the mutual assistance agreement authorizes everyone to operate outside of their normal jurisdiction. The current year Sheriff's Office budget contains appropriated funds for the local match to be paid to the city, and the agreements cover a term beginning October 1st of this year and ending September 30th of next year. And also contain in your materials is some data and statistics from the team's activities the last many years, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
I have one curiosity question, and the curiosity question is simply success. I mean, doing it 15 years, I assume this kind of the state got into this back, must have been a huge problem and decided we're going to put some money in and do it. I mean, what kind of numbers do we get on from year to year tracking for, I mean, you're trying to prevent DWIs, and so are we? I guess that's the question.
For the first 13 years, just here in Forsyth County, I know there have been 6,100, somewhere over 6,000 DWI or citations and arrests. I don't know about statewide the program, but I can certainly find that.
I don't know. I just wanted to know if it's happening here.
Yeah.
And of course, I don't know the comparative, what it was 15 years ago and 16, back longer, but I was just curious. That sounds like a fairly significant
6,000,
number.
yep.
Any other questions for Randy? Thank you very much.
Agenda items number 13 and 14 are for our Elections Director, Tim Suji. 13 is a resolution authorizing execution of an agreement with O&G Dunn Company doing business as Print Elect for the purchase of toner consumables for the election systems and software, ballot on-demand printers. And 14 is an execution with the same company for the purchase of replacement batteries for the DS200 precinct tabulators and express vote ballot marking devices.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. As Chantel mentioned, the first resolution that I present to you is a resolution to authorize a contract for the purchase of toner consumables for our ballot on-demand printers to be used for printing our absentee ballots and to be deployed at all of our early voting sites. We traditionally have 70% turnout during early voting in a presidential general election, and so these toners will support the printers that will be required in accommodating the number of ballots to be printed in this upcoming election. The contract to purchase the printer consumables is an amount not to exceed $67,825, and I'll be glad to take any questions.
And this is not, why is not toner bid? I mean, why are we using their toner? It seems like I remember.
Because this is for part of the voting systems, we can only rely on the materials that can support this voting system, and so it's a sole source provider.
How can toner be a sole source?
Because it's specific to the ballot on demand printers for the voting systems. They're not commercial off the shelf printers.
I just have real problems with toner becoming something that is a sole source purchase. I mean, I don't know enough about printers technically, but it's kind of like a printer. Yes, there are some issues and there's quality, but it seems to me that I just don't understand. I don't understand this because everything that comes into this printing system, everything. I believe the next one is about batteries.
Right, which is specific to the voting equipment that we're utilizing.
A battery is a battery.
I understand what you're saying.
They have life expectancies, they have those things, there are certain kind of things and whatever else it is, but I remember when we bought this, there were my memories, there were 3 vendors the state approved, Does that sound sort of right?
And it went down to 2, but right.
So there were 2.
Right.
And so did the other vendor require everything that you get for it to be purchased through them and a sole source provider? I cannot imagine why you go to the trouble. I can't imagine them able to design a printer that requires a particular kind of toner.
Right. And I can look into that further and provide you with that
Just
information.
something that just doesn't smell right to me in this, for those simple things. Any other questions?
Mr. Suji, so do you know if this is the same company O&G Dunn that is out of New Bern that also printed a Satisfied with Life document picture actually in 1902? I'm going to show you what I found so that I'm clear with what I'm asking you.
I mean, I'm not aware of the history of the company or about this particular picture. I do know that the company was founded in 1902.
Out of New Bern.
Right.
I don't know if I could share this with the rest of the county commissioners, but I think that is definitely of some, it should be of some
We
concern
can't
to
hear.
all.
Yeah, we can't say, well, there we go. Wait a minute. It's coming up.
Okay. I would be interested in confirming that this is the same company, because that could be a different O&G Dunn.
So I could certainly look into that further for you.
I have a separate question.
Yes.
And it really deals with, I guess, the likely extra cost we're going to have with reprinting ballots.
Right.
I'm kind of curious what your estimate on that impact is. And go ahead.
Right. So I in terms of quantity, I do have that information readily available. I do not have the additional cost that would be associated with any reprinting. So in speaking with the vendor, at least 61,400 ballots had already been printed, which is about roughly 30% of the total order that we were going to need. So 61,400 out of 208,000 that was going to be total. We had already printed 3,400 of the absentee ballots in-house using the ballot on demand printers. So there won't necessarily be any cost associated with that except for replenishing the ballot stock that was used for those roughly 3,400 ballots. Again, I don't have the cost information. I'm waiting to get that from them. I just, at this moment, only know the quantity information.
But the contract, the amount should be exactly the same. I mean, surely the printer is not changing the cost. I mean, because this is a vendor that we got to do this contract for whatever it is, 208,000, and surely the cost will be identically whatever that was in that contract.
Right. I mean, they're going to charge us for the 61,400 that had already been printed and will now not be used because it had already been printed.
Yeah, I understand that completely. And then
But with regards to your question, yes, the terms of the contract is still the same. Right.
I'm just kind of curious what that translated into extra cost for us in this particular election. Maybe by next week you could just tell us
That's right.
that
Yes.
amount. That'd be great. Any other questions for Tim?
Couple of quick ones. I was actually going to ask this same question about costs. When you get that estimate, perhaps you could include the staff time for repairing the absentee ballots, because you were poised to start sending them out the day that the order came down from the state Supreme Court 4-3,
right,
reversing the lower court decision. I did have one other question about the toner. Is this a container of toner or a toner cartridge that's inserted?
It's a cartridge that would be inserted into the printer.
And know that for generic printers, you do have interchangeability.
Right.
With
They're more
generic
universal,
sources. Do you happen to know whether there would be cartridges that would be identical, and it's just a matter of we're required by contract to buy from the vendor, or whether it's actually a unique cartridge?
Yeah, so I would have to look into that further, and I can certainly provide you with that information.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Same with the batteries, I guess.
Yeah, which I was going to present next, but
We jumped in, we're covering two agenda topics at the same time. I assume the batteries are the same thing, it's just batteries, and it's buy it through them at their price. Same sole source.
what I will do for you is to look into sort of the proprietary nature of both the batteries and the toner, and if it is in fact possible, to see if there's universal cartridges and batteries that can be equipped within these equipments.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Well, the only thing I say is I don't know how the prices would compare. And it may be that they're simply interested in ensuring that their machines keep working by avoiding errors and picking the wrong generic. I don't know. But, if that is a factor, if we're talking about, this is a figure plucked out of air, but we're talking about a cartridge that we're being charged $60 for, that we'd pay $50 for the generic substitute.
Right.
Come on. That's not much of a big deal, but.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Agenda item number 15 is a resolution authorizing execution of an agreement with I3 Verticals LLC for website and operating system administration and maintenance. Our budget director, Kyle Wolf, will brief this item.
Afternoon, Commissioners. So the Register of Deeds has a contract, or has had a contract with BIS. They were purchased by I3 Verticals LLC. They use this company for their website and operating system administration and maintenance for public access to integrated land records. It's really the core system that they use down there. And so this item is really just to approve the contract with them. I believe it's $62,200, which is the same cost that it's been really for the last 10 years. Any questions?
Any questions for Kyle? Okay, thank you.
Agenda item number 16 is a resolution authorizing execution of an agreement with Custom Data Processing, Inc. to provide software, record-keeping, and workflow system services to the Department of Public Health. Our Assistant Health Director, Nicole Pretty, will brief this item.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. The Department of Public Health is requesting authorization to enter into contract with Custom Data Processing Incorporated for software services in an amount not to exceed $52,124. Custom Data Processing is currently in use at the Department of Public Health to maintain and track environmental health's prior year records, as well as current year plan reviews, permits, and complaints. As such, this contract has not been bid out. The Department of Public Health is requesting an additional year-long contract with the provider while it bids out the services and evaluates other potential vendors.
Questions? So I do have one minor curiosity.
Yes.
You knew that when this contract was going to expire. Why didn't we do the review before it expired so we didn't have to extend it a year?
That is a very good question, and we did miss the mark on that one. This has been a program that's been in place for over 15 years, and we were not aware we needed to continue to bid out for services.
Okay, thank you.
Agenda item number 17 is a resolution authorizing execution of an agreement with NeuroAgile Leadership and Workforce Consulting, LLC, doing business as Allies for Outcomes, to provide consulting services for evaluation of the Forsyth County Department of Social Services Child Welfare System. Our DSS Director, Krista Smith, will brief this item.
Good afternoon, Commissioners.
I'm here today requesting authority to contract with NeuroAgile Leadership and Workforce Consulting, LLC, doing business as Allies for Outcomes beginning September 19th, 2024 through June 30th, 2025, in an amount not to exceed $146,365. This proposed child welfare system-wide evaluation and implementation will result in maximized efficiency and resources, improved delivery of quality services through strong practice and policy application, strengthened collaboration and relationships with community partners, and retention of the workforce, and enhanced overall organizational culture and climate. We sought out 3 proposals for consultative services as follows. Change and Innovation Agency, LLC, was non-responsive. CCR Consulting, LLC, came back with a proposal at $60,000. Allies for Outcomes came back with a proposal at $146,365. Both of the responsive proposals include evaluation and a strategy for business process improvement. However, Allies for Outcomes distinguishes itself from the other consulting services with a deep dive approach, including day-to-day operational assistance and partnering with management, supervisors, and social workers in a team effort to achieve results. They are going to work directly with our line and supervisory levels to develop best practices, including internal work with our management, leadership staff, and support services to develop the processes we need to be able to implement these going forward and trigger our own process development in the future. I am available for any questions you have.
I've got a big question is
Yes.
I'd like to know what CCR is not doing that this vendor is doing, because what you read they're doing is that they're going to do, we're going to coordinate, and we're going to do organizational improvement within your office and in your department, and we're going to talk to people and we're going to try to train them. So I assume the RFP said you kind of wanted that and you needed that, and why. And I'm real curious why CCR at less than half the price.
Absolutely.
What they propose to do that this other company is so distinguishes them so much.
Yes. And I think part of the answer to your question, I need to speak a little bit about our needs. So I brought a little bit of data I want to show you guys.
Great.
So you'll see on the screen, taking a look at our social work tenure. When I came into this director's position less than a year ago now, we had around a 25% vacancy agency, or division-wide. We were at about 20% agency-wide. And in some of our localized programs that are really intensive in need, including child protective services, we were very close to 50% vacancy. So we have spent a lot of my early months working with our leadership team around filling our vacancies. But what we're sitting on now is a lot of staff that have very low tenure. It takes 12 to 24 months to get a social worker really trained with a capacity to do the job somewhat independently. And you will see 50% of our social workers have less than 2 years of experience right now. We have 128 social workers and management staff in that division in child welfare. We have 14 vacancies today, so we're sitting pretty good with 10.9%. Our pre-COVID numbers were generally around 8%, so we're really close to where we need to be. But we have a lot of work that needs to be done getting those workers up to speed to do the job we're asking them to do. And this is happening across the state in terms of people rebuilding their staff. And so we are really challenged with getting them into all the state trainings they need. We have some internal support staff that can do some of that, but we really need help in looking at what the needs are, but then building a system internally to be able to address those and bring our people up to where we need them to be. That's the difference between this consulting firm and the other one. The other one will come in and they will evaluate what we need and they will give us a report and they will say, here are your needs. Okay, go fix them. We need an agency that's going to come in and stand alongside us while we do that work and help us build and implement those systems and develop a system where we can do it ourselves and stand on our own going forward. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. And the other question I might just ask, have you spoken with any customers of this company to know that what they actually do or do differently?
Absolutely. And I just realized that today when I was sitting in here that we did not upload any of that work to you guys, so I will be happy to follow up if you're interested in seeing. We actually got referral letters and descriptions of previous programs from both of the consulting agencies, because a lot have done work in this area with DSSs in this state. So we're not talking about people who don't understand the work that they do. Both agencies hire people out of the system that have retired out of the system, and they have a lot of knowledge and expertise, but the depth of the work that they do is very different, and we have referral letters from counterpart agencies that show that.
Were the referral letters at your solicitation, or did the vendor provide them?
We requested, they were vendor provided. So they were vendor provided. We requested descriptions of prior work that they had done. Based on that, we said we would like referral letters from specific projects that were similar to our project.
I have one request.
Yes.
Between now and next week, when we consider this item, would you mind picking out randomly 2 or 3, or I don't know how many letters they gave you, and actually call and actually let somebody in that that I assume is a DSS in this North Carolina, that's what I'm assuming.
Yes, they
Because
are.
I'm not interested in if they worked in somebody in Washington State. I mean, I'm just kind of curious that, and I assume they're a state company. I assume Department of Health and Human Services recommends them. I'm assuming a couple things. But I'd love for you to personally talk to your counterpart in a DSS agent, another director, and see what they tell you about that particular
Absolutely.
company. And quite frankly, on a fairness, talk to one of the letters from the other one and see if did they just say, here it is and go, or whatever. I mean, I realize it looks like your RFP would have made it clear whether you wanted this is a training time issue. And so the RFP would have led to, what it takes to do that. And so why did the first one, if it was accepted, did they not say they could do it or do what you asked to do?
Well, so in able to be as transparent with you all as possible, this was an informal bid process, not a formal RFP. We went back and forth on whether to consider CCR Consulting reasonably and responsive, but because we had not done a formal RFP, we wanted to make sure we made you all aware of the information we had from them and tried to do our best to clarify why we feel strongly that the other agency can most meet what the need is right now.
And I will say, I personally spoke with the DHHS secretary about this. These were the 2 companies they stated we should consider, and the one that was selected is the one they also felt strongly that we needed.
And I would like you to know I have spoken with my counterpart in a neighboring county. I'm not sure whether she is comfortable with me disclosing, but she neighbors our county and she has used both agencies. And so I have spoken directly with one counterpart, but the letters were provided by the vendor. So I would be happy to follow up with the others.
I'd appreciate that.
Sure.
I'd just like to say, I guess serving on this Health and Human Service Board for so long and being a part of understanding the problem that this social services has had for years, I appreciate you coming in as the new director and taking the bite of this and straightening out this problem. It's desperately needed. And I don't think that you would have recommended this group if you had not clearly researched it, and I appreciate what you've done. It's been a problem for years and years and years, and it certainly needs this attention.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Agenda item number 18 is a resolution authorizing an interlocal agreement with the Winston-Salem Forsyth County Utility Commission for the Rural Hall Highway 65 Waterline Project and associated amendments with this item. Kirby Robinson, our Community Economic Development Director, will brief this item.
Thank you, Madam Manager. Good afternoon again, Mr. Chairman and Board. Just a quick project background. Let's go on. There we go. Yep. Over the course of several years, the board has looked for ways to extend municipal water service to roughly 42 homes located between Rural Hall and Germantown, where residents have concerns about contamination, dry wells, and other issues associated with private water facilities. At your February 17th, 2022 meeting, you approved $500,000 for the Pandemic Response Special Revenue Fund for this water line extension project. The City County Utility Commission received $3.1 million. You heard from Courtney this morning. And state ARPA funds, to do this water line extension, they've spent $494,400 on design, easement acquisition, and construction-related activities up to this point. All right, so the Utility Commission then, as you heard this morning, bid out the construction portion of the project and approved a contract with a low bidder, which is J.R. Lynch, and the amount of that is $2.6 million. And so essentially they need $15,000 of the $500,000 the board approved previously now to encumber that contract. And sort of what this interlocal agreement proposes to do is send them that amount of money now and then hold the balance, which is $479,000 in reserve for change orders. And so we asked them, just to make sure we understood, it's a large amount of money in change orders, what could come up. And they had a lot of, various instances where that money could be used, whether it be site restoration, unsuitable soils, additional excavation, et cetera. And then the county may object to a change order request. So they'll essentially send that request like you would see in a construction project. And if it doesn't make sense or whatever, we certainly have the ability to object to that. Other terms of that interlocal agreement are that the City County Utility Commission will be responsible for constructing the water line. They'll administer the construction of that project. They will own and maintain it once it's complete. Any project expenses over that $3.6 million, which is their 3.1 and the board's 500, will be split evenly, but that would be subject to board approval. We certainly don't expect to have cost overruns, but they felt strongly that there'd be a provision in there that should that happen, we just need to address how we would handle it. And so that would not be handled at a staff level. We'd certainly have to come back to the board to discuss that. But again, with that amount of change orders, we don't feel that is going to be necessary. We certainly hope it's not. The expected completion date of the project is summer 2025. Once complete, residents will need to hire a plumbing company to connect to the new meter box. So you got to connect your house to the meter box. And then if there are unspent change order funds, those could be reallocated by the board for other uses related to that project. Happy to answer any questions the board has.
I'm assuming that in that contract, that one of the drivers for change order potential is probably some kind of cost per cubic foot of rock removal. Some anticipation of running. I mean, I can't imagine a lot of rock that close, but it could be to the surface, and that over nearly 3 miles.
I talked to him a fair amount about that. You're right. I mean, they make predictions, and if you have to move a little bit or go a little deeper, or the dirt's not what it should be it's that type of potential.
Got it. Any other questions for Kirby?
Thank you.
Agenda item number 19 is a resolution authorizing a second amendment to the agreement with Seth Palmater, doing business as Motivated Metal. Our Deputy Manager, Kyle Haney, will brief this item.
Good afternoon again, Commissioners. Back in August of 2022, the board approved a contract with Seth Palmater, doing business as Motivated Metal, and that our individual was selected by the City County Public Art Commission to design, fabricate, deliver, and install a work of art at the Forsyth County Library at the Clemens branch. That project has seen a couple of delays. I believe back in June of 2023, the board approved an amendment to extend the timeline of that to November 30th of 2023. That project has still not been completed. Our staff have done their work. They prepared the site for acceptance of that that sculpture. However, I've been in contact with the artist this week. They are fabricating that piece of art over the next 3 or 4 weeks and intend to deliver it by the end of the year, install it by the end of the year. So this item extends that contract a second time with an end date of December 31st, 2024. It does not appropriate any additional funds. It's still the same price. It really is just extending the time frame of that. The artist is up in New England, and so there's a little bit of managing their time around this project and other projects. However, they've assured us that they would be able to complete this project by the end of this year. Happy to answer any questions.
Questions for Kyle? Thank you.
Agenda item number 20 was pulled. It actually will come back after elections. It will create some elections issues if we change county boundaries now. So we'll bring that back after. Agenda item number 21 is a resolution authorizing execution of an amendment to the lease agreement between Forsyth County and North Carolina Baptist Hospital for the lease of property located at 501 North Cleveland Avenue. Emily Mundy from General Services will brief this item. That is not Emily. James Anderson.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. The item before you is a resolution amending the lease agreement with North Carolina Baptist Hospital for the lease of approximately 4,500 square feet at 501 North Cleveland Avenue. The county leases suites 151 and 191 for operation of our dental clinic. Following completion of the Highland Avenue Center project, space will be upfit in Annex 1 for the dental clinic. So there was a need to extend this lease to accommodate for that construction time. And so this does extend that lease term by 2 years, with the lease expiring November 30th, 2026. And this will provide sufficient time to complete the construction of those projects. And then all other rates and terms of the lease remain unchanged. And either party does have the right to terminate the lease within 90 days of written notice. And the annual rent amount will not exceed $56,694.60.
You just say the rate stays the same?
Yes, sir.
As it is now?
Yes, sir.
Current rate. Any questions for James?
Agenda items 22 to 37 are appointments, and the appointments did close on Monday. Agenda item 38 and 39 are refunds by the tax assessor and collector. Actually, 38 is a refund by the tax assessor and collector. 39, John Burgess, our tax assessor collector, does need to brief. It's a resolution acknowledging the submission of the proposed 2025 schedules of values, standards, and rules for the reappraisal of real property.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. This item acknowledges your receipt of the 2025 Schedule of Standards, Values, and Rules to be used for the countywide reappraisal for 2025. The purpose of these schedules is to provide guidance and a framework for completing real estate appraisals for those making such appraisals, such as our staff. The Schedule of Values consists of many construction rates for both residential and commercial properties. Our commercial rates are utilizing the Marshall and Swift July 24 rates. The 2025 Schedule of Values will be available for public inspection in our office on or before September 20th. Then on October 3rd, there will be a public hearing on those schedules at your commissioner meeting. The hearing is specific to the documents that make up the Schedule of Standards, Values, and Rules. October 17th is the anticipated adoption date, followed by 4 once-a-week newspaper advertisements of such. Be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Any questions for John? Thank you very much.
Okay. Agenda items 40 and 41 are reports. 42 is an added item. It's carryover from the last meeting, and it's a resolution adopting a county community grant funding policy to aid in administering community grant funds for nonprofit organizations. Aisha Carter from our Budget Management Department will brief this item.
Good afternoon again, County Commissioners. You should have the updated version of the community grants policy. Now, see if I can put that on the arm, the elbow for you guys.
Is this updated? Is this updated? Is this updated?
So again, this is the updated version of the community grants policy, and I'll kind of go over some highlights for the commissioners. So the purpose Funding shall be applicable to all requests for support from nonprofit organizations that align with county services and serve the citizens of Forsyth County. To be eligible, nonprofits and funding should serve and support Forsyth County residents with program activities in Forsyth County. Each nonprofit must be registered with the Secretary of State and submit their most recent Form 990. Applicants submitted after the due date or that are incomplete will not be accepted. Funding should align with at least one of the board priorities, which is safety, health, education, cultural, updated, and economic opportunities. Total community grant funding will be a % of the general fund budget. Applications will be available October through November for each fiscal year. Grants will be approved during the April or May board commissioners meeting with awards effective July 1st. There will be an orientation and training to go over this new policy with potential applicants, as well as go over the application. Subject matter experts will review applications and present them to the Board of County Commissioners for their consideration. Funding organizations will require on-site monitoring visits by county staff. Payments of funds will be distributed on a monthly reimbursement basis for costs actually incurred and paid in accordance with the approved budget and activities. For those organizations who are facing economic hardships, they may qualify for an advancement if they can prove their hardship, and use of funds will be reported through monthly performance and expenditure reports, and backup documentation will be required for that reporting. Any questions?
Any questions for Aisha?
Thank you.
Thank you for all your work.
Thank you.
Thank you. Agenda item number 43 is also an added item, and this is a resolution approving the acquisition by the City of King of real property located in Forsyth County for the purpose of constructing a firehouse in accordance with the provisions of North Carolina General Statute 153A-15. Our Deputy Manager Kyle Haney will brief this item.
Good afternoon again, Commissioners. So this is the third fire item today. So this item was previewed a couple weeks ago. Chief Roberson with the City of King Fire Department came and spoke a little bit about the desire to acquire some property for an additional fire station, firehouse. The City of King does operate a municipal fire department, and we contract with them to service the King Fire and Rescue Protection District here in Forsyth County. General statutes requires that if they need to purchase property within Forsyth County, they would need the Board of Commissioners approval. And so they have identified a property located at the intersection of Spain-Harrow Mill Road and Doral Drive that they have negotiated with the property owners, and the City of King has come to terms with them for the purchase of this property with the intention of at some point building a fire station at that point. They do have budget already for the purchase of the property, so they're not requesting any sort of tax increase for that. They do not have a current timeline or plan for the construction of that firehouse. It is a firehouse for the future that they plan. And they do not anticipate purchasing additional apparatus or the need for additional staff outside of their current planned staff for that. They would utilize current apparatus and staff at that firehouse. I do have a map up on the screen to show you the location of that firehouse. So there it is at the corner of Spain-Harrow Mill Road and Doral Drive. I will note here one of the main benefits of that additional firehouse. There's a section of Forsyth County, Hollyberry Court, and then Hollyberry Lane over here, Hidden Ridge Trail, is in the King Fire Tax District, but currently outside of an area that can be reached within 5 miles on a roadway. So they do have the individuals who live on that road have a higher insurance rate because they are not in a area that can be reached in 5 minutes by our fire station. Neither Old Richmond or King can get there in that period. This new fire station would allow them to be within a 5-minute radius of the fire station. Additionally, there's some area, yes ma'am. I do not have that data. Chief Roberson is here. I'm not sure. How many homes are in that area? I'll let Chief Roberson.
Good afternoon. Give me 1 second. I think I briefed that. I had the population for that area was 1,651. As far as the number of homes, I do not have that exact number. I do know there's 3 subdivisions within that area, along with several private roads that have several houses on them, not including all the houses along Spanner Mill Road itself.
No, ma'am, that was the majority of what I was going to say. And Chief Roberson, if you wanted to stay up here in case the board has any questions, I will note that there's some additional area that also has a higher rated because of the distance from fire stations, both Old Richmond and King Fire. So that's all the information I had prepared, but Chief Roberson is here if you have any additional questions.
Any other questions for the chief or Kyle? Thank you both.
That is all the agenda items that I have, Mr. Chairman.
All righty. Well, it's been a busy day. Anyway, thank you for everyone, and we'll see you next week.